Welcome back to News in Focus. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, Road Accident Fund Chief Executive Officer Collins Letsoalo has denied any wrongdoing amid corruption allegations involving a 79 million rand lease deal for the fund's Johannesburg offices. This after a whistleblower wrote to the public protector accusing Letsoalo of overturning bid committee decisions to favor property management company Moana Properties, which was later awarded the contract. Now, the Special Investigating Unit is investigating the Road Accident Fund for alleged corruption and maladministration. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome risk analyst and former Road Accident Fund contractor, Stanley Bezuidenhout. Stanley, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Hello, good afternoon for us, and always a pleasure.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Stanley, when one talks of the Road Accident Fund, it's been an organization that has always been a head-scratcher. You work there as a fund contractor. These allegations that have occurred, is this something that is new, or has the RAF always been one where one has to look at it through a microscope?
Well, literally, I think it should always be looked at the microscope, and that it always has. In fact, even I have been called in by the Road Accident Fund during my tenure on the contract to the fund and questioned on the, let's call it, the dynamics that led to that contract I was on. It was a pilot project and it was ended, but even after its ending, there seemed to have been some kind of internal, let's call it, corporate political dynamic at play, because people who made decisions were questioned, and then I was called in to answer to those people's actions, which of course I couldn't do because I wasn't party to internal decision-making processes. But it's always been in the spotlight. And I think the main reason why the fund is always in the spotlight is because of three simple things. The first thing is it handles an enormous amount of money and takes money through the fuel levies directly from South African pockets. Secondly, how it manages and administers that money is subject to interpretation, and some decisions that are made lead to investigations of this kind. And then thirdly, because of how complex the model is and how dynamic the environment is in which it operates, there are ample opportunities for, let's call it, misappropriation, inadequate assignment of funds or funneling of funds. So it will always be scrutinized, and I think it should.
Yeah, here's the thing, Stanley. Of course, like any other state-owned entity, there has to be a microscope that is obviously gone ahead and investigated with. I mean, we see that with Eskom, of course, during those years between 2010 and 2020, when it went through a very tumultuous time. That's just one of it, of course, PRASA, Transnet, others, and you can name a few. The thing about the Road Accident Fund is it really deals with fragile situations. It deals with ones where you see accidents occurring and the victims of these accidents are reliant on the RAF to go ahead and assist them when it comes to that. So when these allegations come out, I think the public at large has every right, don't they, Stanley, to have these questions, because these are funds that are needed to assist victims. And when you see these allegations of maladministration occurring, I mean, the public has every right to go ahead and say, well, what is going on here?
Absolutely. And what I find more worrying about this whole trend is not so much, look, Mr. Letsoalo is within his right to defend himself, as I think any reasonable person would. What worries me is the fact that he chose, let's call it, a public platform before the SIEU investigation is completed, before the allegations are fully formulated, before there's even a proper report available. He's chosen the public domain to frame himself as innocent. And if you listen to the presentation he made, which was lengthy, what makes people even more suspicious is when somebody speaks for an hour and a half and says almost nothing. It sounds like word salad, the impact that it has on people. So he gets into all kinds of things. I mean, even race entered into the equation, and he basically claims that there are people that are targeting him and it's personal, etc. But it's not only him, and it's never been only him. So it's a pity that he chose to approach it in that way, because now it literally fused the fire of suspicion, at least in my mind, because if he came to the fore with with logical facts in response to actual charges. One of the questions by the media that was put to him online was, "You've addressed a lot, but not the issues that the allegations against you." To which he said, "I won't be answering those. I don't have to. I don't owe you an answer." That raises further concerns.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where I wanted to come to it, because you're the chief executive officer of the RAF. And I mentioned that in the first part of that question I asked you, Stanley. I mean, you hold such an important position because, again, you're dealing with money that helps victims of accidents in this country. And the fact that he could give such an answer, and you make a valid point. Look, he's within his rights, as any other South African is, to go ahead and defend himself in the court. But the fact that you go ahead and say, well, I don't need to answer this question to you, that already in itself really paints a target on your back and makes the work much more easier for the SIU to go ahead and complete this investigation.
Yeah, you almost want to raise the, let's call it the point that you often hear, the man doth protest too much. He spent a lot of time with arguments like, why would I do it? Obviously, I'm bound by the law. I wouldn't do something. It's almost like if a witness appears in court and they spend most of their time trying to tell you how innocent they are rather than answering the questions, the logical follow-up question would be, but hang on, why are you deflecting back from the facts in the matter? He referenced some documents and he referenced some minutes of meetings and some structures, etc. But to the general public, at least to me, and I have experienced at investigating matters, it was difficult to determine exactly what he was saying. Is he saying he's innocent because of evidence, or are you saying he's innocent because the evidence he's presented in his mind is an illustration of his innocence? I couldn't really find the departure between those two issues.
Stanley, you worked obviously at the RAF, and again, you know, the fragility of this organization is quite important because it's money taken from the fuel levy. South Africans are paying quite a lot for fuel at this very moment. So whatever money is gone to the road accident fund, the public is going to really have every right to go ahead and scrutinize it. From your experience, organizations like this, how important is it to handle the money issue? Especially something that really has to be viewed in the public eye as an important asset. And when I say asset, because at the end of the day, any one of us can be involved in an accident. God forbid it doesn't happen. But the fact is that when this money's come through, I think both you and I know it takes quite a long time because the RAF has to do its due diligence before going ahead and paying out the victim of an accident. Talk to us about that. And when you hear these allegations occurring, it really does bring about frustration if you are a citizen of this country.
Well, you have to see it in the context of several incidents that happened in the last, let's say, 10 odd years. One incident that was particularly concerning is that there was a judgment against the Road Accident Fund to pay an accident victim, to which they actually had to attach their assets. They had to have the sheriff go to their offices and attach their assets before they were paid. That's after the court order was issued. Another problem that came up I've worked with attorneys that submit Road Accident Fund claims, and I've acted as an expert witness in those cases. And I've heard from several attorneys apologies that even where the Road Accident Fund had a judgment against them, even where the trial was over, the fund simply went back to court and said, we intend to fight all those old trials over again, which means some of those lawyers were sitting on their last days of retirement and had to reopen their files and go back and fight the case again. Then you add to that the current allegations that are running in the way in which things are happening. I've been contracted to the Road Accident Fund. I've been contracted to the Road Traffic Management Corporation. I've been contracted to traffic departments in the government, even to the South African police. I've supplied, books and stuff. And I can tell you that when it comes to securing a contract, it's an onerous process. I know for a fact that even as an officially appointed contractor by agreement, by signed agreement to the Road Accident Fund, I couldn't be paid unless the CEO signed off on it. And the fact is that because he's the last signature on the approval, the buck, again, just simply stops with him. And it's really you see, it's easy for a CEO to say, we have a board and the board decided. But I've seen with my own eyes in meetings where there are, say, 10 board members, but 5 of them are simply not available and they pass proxy to somebody else. Now, the board agreed might mean, it could mean anything, including that there wasn't, a full amount of people and that many proxies were handed over to other people. And you always have on boards some people who are highly active and some people that are almost never present. And that's what raises the concerns around us. The CEO is the captain of the ship. He's the person that finally decides whether even the advice from the board is acceptable to him, because he's the person that has the capacity to say, while everybody agreed, I don't know if I should be signing this. You, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, please look further into this before we do this.
One final question, Stanley. The whistleblower, of course, wrote to the public protector. It's an unnamed person at this very moment. But for an organization like the RAF, I mean, this is important, isn't it? I think, we've seen whistleblowers really losing their lives or having their lives threatened when they've gone ahead and reported to the respective authorities when it comes to maladministration. But this act over here, it still shows that even though, we always question democracy in this country, here's an opportunity for people to report maladministration and corruption. And of course, we are still waiting for this to be proven true or not. But it's a good sign, isn't it, that an organization like the RAF has employees that can go ahead and report such acts that are occurring.
Having done what I've done for the last 25 years, I can tell you that anybody standing up against an organizational structure, whether it's private or government, is typically not well received, easily vilified, and often persecuted. So, yes, it's reassuring to see that a whistleblower is willing to come forward. Of course, Mr. Letsoalo went along and said, yeah, maybe it's a disgruntled employee in these allegations or whatever. But the fact is, that's where whistleblowers often come from. People who feel disgruntled and cross to the point where they look at the organization they were in and go, but wait a minute, all these things I saw that were wrong, now's the perfect time for me to tell somebody. And that's kind of, let's call it their last act as their exit. Just because that happens, just because they were motivated by an event within the organization, does not for a second disqualify the gravity or the importance of what it is they are reporting.
Stanley Bezuidenhout, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Always a pleasure.
That's Stanley Bezuidenhout, risk analyst and former road accident fund contractor. Well, that's all we have for you here on News in Focus. Tomorrow, it's Talking Point from myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.